The air inside Liarden carried truffle oil, old cognac, and something sharper that didn't belong on any menu. It was Tuesday at 1:15 in the afternoon, the hour when Money ate lunch in public and called it work. Soft jazz slipped between tables like a thin ribbon. Glasses met with expensive, careless clinks. A server passed with a tray of oysters, the shells shining under warm light. Laughter rose and fell in practiced waves, as if the whole room had agreed on a single joke. At table 4, Preston Calloway sat at the center of his own weather system. 42, clean jaw, navy suit cut so precisely it looked engineered. He wore it like armor. His laugh wasn't a laugh so much as a bark that bounced off the mirrors and forced people nearby to pretend they weren't listening. A glossy prospectus lay open on the white tablecloth, spread like a map of a country he planned to conquer. Across from him sat Brad Sterling, eager smile, eager eyes, the kind of man who copied confidence the way others copied homework. Next to Brad was Tom Miller, pale in the restaurant's warm lighting, fingers tapping at his tablet as if the glass could bite him. Preston swirled his Pinot Noir. The wine caught the light and turned it into something almost black. He leaned back, comfortable, loud. "It's a done deal. Rutherford Logistics is bleeding. We go in, we buy the debt for pennies, flip it into equity, and we own the Northeast supply chain." Brad's grin widened. He raised his glass like a worshiper. Tom didn't raise anything. Tom's eyes flicked to a graph on his screen. His tapping sped up. "It feels too easy. Their quarter was trash, but the stock is holding steady. Someone's propping it up." Preston dismissed him with a lazy wave, not even looking. "Retail, dumb money. They see a legacy name and think it's safe." He took a slow sip, then set the glass down with a soft, final click. "We gut it, strip the assets, sell the husk. Free money." He snapped his fingers, sharp and impatient, the sound slicing through the jazz. "Garson." "More wine." The person who stopped at his shoulder was not named Garson. Her name was Sarah Jenkins, 34, though the dark circles under her eyes gave time an unfair advantage. Her uniform hung a size too large on her frame, as if it belonged to someone who had already quit. Hair pulled into a utilitarian bun. Cheap, non-slip shoes, worn at the heels, the kind that squeaked faintly on polished floors. She had been on her feet for 6 hours. Her wrists remembered the weight of trays even when her hands were empty. She cradled the bottle against her forearm, label facing outward, fingers placed with practiced precision. She poured with a steady tilt, then twisted the bottle at the end to stop the last drop from falling. A tiny ritual, controlled, quiet. Preston didn't look up. To him, she was a moving part of the room, like the ice bucket or the linen napkin. Brad did look. He leaned back, warmed by afternoon wine and the safety of Preston's approval. His smile sharpened. "Hey, Prez," Brad said, loud enough to invite the table next to them into the punchline. "You said the Rutherford thing is so obvious even a monkey could see it. Why don't we test that?" Preston lifted an eyebrow, amused. "Oh, yeah?" Brad gestured with his glass toward Sarah, who was placing the bottle back into the ice bucket. "Ask the help. If she likes it, we bail. If she's never heard of it, we're golden." Tom's mouth tightened. He didn't laugh, but he didn't stop it either. His tablet stayed between him and the room like a shield. Preston's grin widened as if he'd been handed a toy. He rotated his chair. The legs scraped softly against the floor. It was a small sound, but it changed the air. Sarah was mid-step toward the kitchen when Preston's body blocked her path. He looked her up and down with the slow confidence of someone pricing an object. His eyes were glazed with entitlement, not curiosity. "Excuse me, sweetheart," he said. His voice wore mock politeness like cologne. "We have a serious question. A billion-dollar question." Sarah's fingers tightened around the edge of her serving tray. The metal pressed into her palm. Her gaze dropped to the tablecloth because looking at him felt like giving him something. "Yes, sir," she said. "Do you need more bread?" "No bread," Preston chuckled. Brad snorted into his wine. A ripple of laughter moved through their corner of the room. Preston leaned forward, elbows near the glossy papers. "I've got cash burning a hole in my pocket. I'm thinking of buying a company called Rutherford Logistics. Trucks, warehouses, the whole thing." He watched her like he was waiting for a trick. "If you had $10 million right now, would you buy it?" Sarah's throat tightened. She could feel rent past due in Queens like a weight on her chest. She could see her father's medical bills on her kitchen counter, stacked like silent threats. One complaint from a man like this, and she would be gone before the dinner shift. "I'm just a waitress, sir," she said, quiet, careful. "I wouldn't know about things like that." Brad's grin turned cruel. "She'd buy lottery tickets. Press." Preston waved that away, still focused on her. "Come on, just a guess. Red or black? Buy or sell? Use that intuition." Sarah stood still, tray held close like a shield. The jazz kept playing, glasses kept clinking. But inside her, something uncoiled. Her eyes flicked, almost against her will, to the papers on the table. The prospectus was open, the pages glossy, the charts too clean, too confident. She saw highlighted lines. She saw projected numbers. She saw a footer with a date printed in small type, as if the truth could be hidden by shrinking it. Her jaw tightened by a fraction. A microscopic shift, like a lock turning. Preston didn't notice the shift. He was already smiling, already sure of the ending. Sarah drew in a breath. The scent of truffle and wine filled her lungs. Her fingers relaxed on the tray, then steadied. The room didn't go silent. The room stayed itself. But at table 4, time narrowed to the space between her mouth and his grin. She looked up, and for the first time, Preston Calloway saw her eyes, not her apron. "What do you think?" he asked, soft, taunting, enjoying the edge he thought he had. Sarah's lips parted. The tray didn't shake. The answer was coming. Sarah's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I wouldn't touch Rutherford with your money, let alone mine." The words landed cleanly, like a glass set down too hard. Brad's grin stalled mid-breath. Tom's tapping stopped. Preston blinked as if the room had shifted an inch to the left. "Excuse me?" Preston said, still smiling, but the smile had lost its teeth. Sarah adjusted her grip on the tray. The metal edge pressed into her palm, grounding her. Her eyes dropped to the open prospectus, then lifted again, steady. "You're looking at their quarter through headline numbers," she said, and her finger calloused from plates, and heat hovered over the paper without touching it. "But the truth isn't in the charts, it's in the footnotes." A beat of silence widened. He leaned back slightly, amused again, trying to put her back into her place with a laugh. "This is adorable. Go on." He didn't know that the calm in her face wasn't servitude, it was calculation. He didn't know that the woman standing in front of him had a master's degree in applied mathematics, or that she'd spent years reading balance sheets the way other people read weather reports. He didn't know her name, wasn't even the most dangerous thing about her. Sarah inhaled. The restaurant's noise blurred at the edges, like a camera focusing. The jazz became distant. The clink of glassware softened into a dull shimmer. "Page 114, she said. Tom's eyes snapped to the document, reflexive. Brad looked between them, suddenly less entertained. Preston's brows drew together, irritation pricking through his arrogance. Sarah didn't hesitate. "They're using an assumed rate of return of 8.5% for their pension obligations," she said, and the numbers came out of her like muscle memory. "Market average is closer to 5. That difference isn't optimistic. It's a disguise." Preston's smile thinned. He tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. "Pension assumptions are flexible." "Not like this." Sarah's finger finally touched the paper, a light tap that felt louder than the music. "If you adjust it to reality, you're not looking at an underfunded plan. You're looking at insolvency." Brad's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again as if he'd forgotten how to be part of a conversation. Sarah kept going, each sentence short enough to hit, clean enough to understand. "And there's a change in control clause in the union contract. A poison pill. If you acquire them, the deficit becomes immediately payable." Tom's face drained. He was already scanning, scrolling, hungry for confirmation. His eyes flicked across the page like a man searching for a fire exit. Preston's hand tightened around his wine glass. The stem squeaked faintly under the pressure. "How much?" Preston asked, voice lower now. The bark was gone. 400 million, Sarah said, and didn't let her gaze drop. "Give or take. You're not buying a supply chain. You're buying a stylized bankruptcy." The words hung there. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just true. A nearby table laughed at something unrelated. A fork scraped a plate. The world kept moving. But at table 4, the air went dense. Tom's tablet lit up as he pulled a fresh filing, his fingers suddenly too fast, too urgent. The screen glow made his face look sick. He didn't speak yet, but the speed of his breathing changed. Preston stared at Sarah like he'd been slapped. His eyes narrowed, not in mockery now, but in the instinct of a predator realizing another predator had been standing quietly beside him. "Who are you?" he asked, and the question wasn't a joke anymore. Sarah's throat tightened. The sharp edge of what she'd done finally caught up to her. The room rushed back in a sudden awareness of cameras on phones, of waiters moving, of how quickly a narrative could form around a moment like this. "I'm just the waitress," she said, the words smaller than before. Her fingers pulled the tray closer to her chest. "I'll get your check." She turned. The heels of her non-slip shoes made a soft, urgent squeak as she moved away. The swinging doors ahead of her trembled as someone passed through from the other side. She slipped into that gap like she'd been trained for it, disappearing into the kitchen's brighter, harsher light. The doors swung once, twice, then settled. Preston stayed still. His wine glass hovered halfway to his mouth, forgotten. His jaw worked as if he was chewing something bitter. He looked down at the prospectus, at the neat charts and confident language, and then slowly his hand moved. He found the page. 114. The thin paper rasped softly under his fingertip. The footnote block sat there in smaller font, dense and boring, the kind of text designed to be skipped. Under the warm restaurant lights, the ink looked almost gray. Preston stared at it. The words didn't change, but the room did. His phone buzzed once against the table, a muted vibration against linen. He ignored it. "Tom," Preston said, and his voice had turned quiet in a way that made Brad straighten without understanding why. "Pull the raw filings, not the glossy banker summary. The real ones." Tom didn't look up. He was already doing it. A faint series of taps, fast and nervous, filled the small space between them. Brad swallowed. His earlier laughter felt like a stain he couldn't wipe off. She just did that in her head," he murmured, more to himself than to Preston. Preston's eyes stayed on the footnotes. On page 114, the tiny print waited like a trap that had been there the whole time. And for the first time that afternoon, Preston Calloway didn't feel like the wolf at the table. He felt like the man who'd almost stepped off a cliff without knowing it existed. The limousine door sealed with a soft, expensive thud, shutting out Liardon's warm light and laughter as if the restaurant had never existed. Inside, everything smelled like leather and faint citrus cleaner. The cabin lights were dim, the windows tinted to a polite darkness. The city slid past in gray fragments. Glass, steel, a flash of scaffolding while the car's suspension swallowed every bump like it was swallowing guilt. No one poured scotch. No one joked. The silence wasn't strategic. It was stunned. Tom Miller sat hunched forward with his laptop open on his knees, tethered to the car's Wi-Fi. The little connection icon in the corner flickered between one bar and none. Each time it dipped, his jaw tightened. His fingers kept moving anyway, fast and precise, as if speed could bully the signal into cooperating. Brad sat back, too still, trying to look casual and failing. He kept rubbing his thumb over the stem of his empty glass as if it might anchor him. Preston stared out the window, but his focus wasn't on the skyline. His eyes had the blank distance of a man replaying a moment he didn't want anyone else to see. The only sound was the soft clatter of keys, and beneath it the steady whisper of the car's climate system. Preston finally broke the quiet without turning his head. "Talk to me," he said. Tom's voice came out thin. "I'm pulling the raw filings from the SEC database, not the deck." He swallowed and refreshed the page again. The Wi-Fi icon flashed. "Give me 10 seconds. Brad tried for a laugh. It cracked in his throat and died. She was theatrical. Tom didn't look up. She was accurate. Preston's gaze snapped from the window to Tom. Was she bluffing? The laptop pinged one sharp notification tone and Tom flinched as if it were a siren. He clicked fast, scrolled faster. The glow from the screen made his face look even paler. "I don't know how we missed it," Tom whispered. Preston leaned forward. The leather creased under his weight. "Missed what?" Tom turned the laptop slightly so Preston could see. Rows of text, dense footnote language. A heading with letters and numbers that looked like an address to something buried on purpose. There, Tom said, pointing with a trembling finger. Pension assumptions. They're using 8.5%. Brad's lips parted. He leaned in despite himself. Tom's cursor dragged over the line, highlighting it in a bright block of color that looked obscene against the dull font. If you normalize it to market returns, the obligations blow out. Preston's eyes narrowed. How far? Tom scrolled. His fingertip left a faint smear on the trackpad. Keep going, change of control provision. The car hummed. Rain began tapping the roof in a light scatter, soft at first, then steadier. Tom's cursor stopped on a paragraph buried deeper, the kind of clause someone would call boilerplate right before it killed them. Tom read it once, then again, as if the words might change if he stared hard enough. Oh my God, he breathed. Preston's voice went low. Say it, Tom swallowed. If we acquire more than 51% of voting shares, the pension deficit becomes immediately payable. On close. Brad sat back as if the seat had struck him. That's insane. It's real, Tom said. His voice cracked on the last word. He scrolled to the numbers. His lips moved as he computed, then stopped as if he'd hit a wall. It's not 400. Preston's nostrils flared. What is it? Tom's finger hovered over the figure like it was radioactive. 420 million. Brad's head turned slowly, eyes wide. She was off by 20. Tom looked up for the first time. His pupils were blown wide in the screen glare. She did the math in her head, while pouring wine. Preston didn't blink. His mouth went dry. He could taste the tannin of the Pinot still clinging to his tongue, suddenly sour. The road noise faded behind the sound inside his own chest. He pictured a wire transfer, $50 million. A deposit sent with a smile. He pictured a signature. A handshake. A congratulatory photo op. Then the trigger. Then the payout demand like a guillotine dropping. He saw the firm's capital bleeding out in a single afternoon, saw margin calls rippling through every position like a disease, saw his name on a headline he couldn't buy his way out of. His hand tightened into a fist on the seat beside him. The leather squeaked. Stop, Preston said to the driver, voice sharp. The driver didn't brake immediately. New York traffic didn't allow for mercy, but the change in Preston's tone made the man's shoulders stiffen. A turn signal clicked. The car eased toward the curb in a smooth, obedient arc. Sir? The driver asked, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Preston's gaze locked on the reflection. Turn the car around. The driver hesitated for a fraction of a second, reading the mood, calculating risk. Back, Preston snapped. Now. The indicator clicked faster. The car merged, then cut across a lane with controlled aggression. Outside, a horn blared. Inside, no one moved. Brad's hands were clenched in his lap. He looked suddenly smaller, as if the restaurant's laughter had been a costume he could no longer wear. Tom kept staring at the screen, scrolling through the clause again and again, checking the header, the addendum date, the cross-references. His finger hovered over the trackpad like he was afraid to touch it. Preston sat very still in the center of the leather cabin. His mind raced, but his face didn't show it. He held himself together the way a man holds a cracked glass, careful, controlled, terrified of the moment it finally shatters. The rain thickened against the roof, a steady drumming now. The wipers began their rhythm swish, pause, swish like a metronome counting down something he didn't want to name. He looked at Tom's laptop one more time, at the highlighted line, at the number that could have ended him. Then he looked at the dark window, at his own faint reflection staring back. In that reflection, he didn't see the wolf of 57th Street. He saw a man who had almost walked off a cliff because he'd been too busy laughing. Preston's jaw set. His voice came out calm, but it wasn't comfort. Kill the Rutherford deal, he said. Tom nodded once. Quick. Done. Preston exhaled slowly through his nose. And when we get back? Brad's eyes flicked up, wary. Preston's gaze stayed forward, fixed on the rain-streaked glass and the direction the car was taking them. I'm finding her. The limousine slid back to the curb with a soft hiss of brakes, the kind of quiet arrival money could afford. The rain had eased into a thin drizzle, turning the sidewalk into a slick ribbon that reflected Liarden's gold awning like melted light. Preston didn't wait for the driver. He pushed the door open himself and stepped out too fast, his Italian loafers immediately darkening at the edges as they met wet concrete. A couple of pedestrians glanced at him, then looked away, trained by the city to ignore urgency unless it belonged to them. He moved with one goal, eyes scanning through the glass as if the restaurant might have rearranged itself in his absence. Inside, the lunch rush had thinned. The jazz was lower. The room had the soft exhale of people finishing expensive meals. He entered, and the warmth hit him: truffle, butter, perfume, then something colder underneath, the memory of her voice. At the podium, Henri stood like a gatekeeper in pressed black, his posture rigid and rehearsed. His reservation tablet glowed in his hands. When he saw Preston, his expression snapped into customer service concern, polished and thin. "Mr. Calloway," Henri said, the name delivered like an apology and a compliment at once. "Did you forget something? A phone? A wallet?" Preston didn't slow. His gaze sliced past Henri, searching the floor, the aisles, the shadows between tables. "The waitress," Preston said. "The one from table 4. Henri's eyebrows lifted, confusion turning into professional caution. "Is there a problem? Was the service unsatisfactory? I assure you she will be disciplined if—" "Shut up!" The words came out flat, not loud, but sharp enough that Henri stiffened. Preston leaned closer, close enough to smell Henri's cologne over the restaurant's perfume. "I need her last name. I need her number." Henri's mouth tightened. His eyes flicked around, checking who might be watching. "Sir, I cannot give out employee personal information. It is against policy." Preston's hand went into his jacket and came out with a money clip. He didn't peel bills one by one. He pulled a stack and slammed it onto the podium. Paper hit wood with a dull, violent slap. $2,000 in crisp, hundreds spread slightly at the edges, like a fan of pressure. Henri froze. His fingers tightened around the tablet. He looked at the money, then at Preston's face. The desperation there wasn't theatrical. It was real, and it unsettled him. "Policy!" Henri began, voice thinner now. Preston didn't blink. Just changed. A beat passed. Somewhere behind them, a plate clinked. A chair scraped. The restaurant kept breathing. Henri's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He lowered his voice, leaning in, the way men did when breaking rules for people who could break them back. "Her name is Sarah Jenkins," he said. Preston's shoulders eased by a fraction, as if the syllables were a rope thrown to a drowning man. "And her address?" Preston asked, already reaching for something to write on. Henri shook his head quickly. "We do not have her current address. She moved recently." His eyes flicked to the dining room again, and his expression shifted into something else, something cautious, almost reluctant sympathy. "But, sir," Henri added, hesitating as if the next words might cost him more than the money. "If I may." Preston's gaze sharpened. "What?" Henri held his tablet closer to his chest, as if it could protect him from what he was about to say. "She is overqualified," he whispered. "She has been here 4 months. She never speaks to anyone. She eats her lunch alone, reading books, forensic accounting." The last phrase came out like a confession. Preston's jaw tightened. He pulled a cocktail napkin from the podium and wrote the name down with a pen that barely worked, pressing too hard. The ink scratched. The paper wrinkled. Henri's voice dropped even lower. "We thought she was studying for an exam. A CPA, perhaps." He swallowed again. "But sometimes men come looking for her." Preston's pen stopped mid-stroke. "What kind of men?" Henri's eyes darted toward the door, then back to Preston. "Process servers? Debt collectors?" He said it like a warning, not gossip, not kind men. The words landed with a different weight than any number Tom had shown him. Debt collectors didn't hunt people who were safe. They hunted people who were cornered. Preston looked down at the napkin in his hand. Sarah Jenkins. A name written on cheap paper, but it felt heavier than the stack of money still on the podium. "She is in trouble," Henri continued, almost pleading now. "She works double shifts, never takes a break, terrified of losing this job." Preston's gaze lifted slowly. He saw Henri again, not the snooty gatekeeper, but a man trying to warn another man that he was stepping into something sharp. Preston tucked the napkin into his pocket like it was evidence. He turned away from the podium. Henri's voice followed him, still hushed. "Mr. Calloway, if you are angry." Preston didn't look back. I'm not angry. He pushed through the restaurant's door into the drizzle. The cold air hit his face like a reset. The driver opened the limo door, but Preston barely registered the gesture. He climbed in and sat down hard. The leather creaked under him. Tom looked up from his laptop, eyes searching Preston's face for instructions. Brad's posture stiffened, defensive, as if money and fear had made Preston unpredictable. Preston pulled the napkin out and stared at the name. The ink had bled slightly from the rain on his fingers. Back to the office, Preston said. Tom exhaled, relieved to have a direction. Preston's gaze stayed on the napkin, on the cheap paper, on the name that didn't feel real enough for what she had done. Tom, he added, voice colder now, controlled. Drop Rutherford. Kill it. Tell the bankers we found accounting irregularities and we're walking. Tom nodded. Done. Preston turned his head toward Brad. His eyes weren't loud, but they made Brad sit up straighter anyway. Call our investigator, Preston said. The one who doesn't ask questions. Brad hesitated. Cohen? Yes. Preston's fingers tightened around the napkin until it crinkled. I want a full dossier on Sarah Jenkins. School, work history, anything. His jaw flexed. I want to know why someone like her is serving filet mignon to people like us. Brad tried to make it a joke, but his voice came out uneven. You think she's a spy? Preston stared through the tinted window at the city sliding past, every building suddenly feeling like a hiding place. No, he said quietly. Spies are sloppy. He glanced down at the name one more time. She was perfect. 3 days stretched like a bad position that wouldn't close. Preston's office on the top floor of Hudson Yards usually felt like victory glass. Height, the river laid out below like a private asset. Now it felt like a cage made of money. The panoramic view didn't calm him. It only reminded him how far a fall could be. He slept in fragments. When he did sleep, the page numbers came back. Small type, hidden clauses, traps that only existed because people like him preferred summaries. Outside his glass walls, the firm moved the way it always moved. Analysts pacing with coffees, screens flickering, phones pressed tight to ears. But every time someone laughed, it sounded wrong to him, too close to the bark he'd used in the restaurant. On the second day, the news hit. A junior analyst hurried into the conference room with a tablet held like a tray. The headline was stark in black and white, the kind of print that made rich men suddenly careful. Rutherford Logistics implodes after accounting scandal revealed. The article scrolled under his fingers, naming market concerns, irregular disclosures, sudden withdrawal of key financing. Then it praised him. The Oracle of Hudson Yards, one talking head called him, smiling into a studio camera. Preston watched the clip on mute. The man on screen gestured with confidence, pointing at a chart that looked clean now only because Preston had stepped away in time. He felt his stomach tighten with something that wasn't pride. By the third day, Cohen arrived. There was no knock Preston recognized. Cohen didn't announce himself. He simply appeared at the doorway with a thick manila folder in one hand, as if the building itself had produced him. Cohen was built like a vending machine, square shoulders, dense forearms, and dressed in gray that matched the office's weathered steel tones. His eyes moved once around the room, taking inventory. The corner desk, the screens, the people, the exits. He placed the folder on Preston's glass desk. The impact was soft, but it carried weight. The manila slapped down flat, then settled. You're not going to like this, Cohen said. Preston didn't answer. He slid a finger under the flap and opened it. The first page was a photograph. Sarah, except not the Sarah the restaurant had known. Not the one in an oversized uniform with tired eyes and cheap shoes. This Sarah was younger, sharper, lit by camera flashes. She stood on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, hair-styled, suit-tailored, smiling with a brightness that looked expensive. Behind her, an American flag blurred in the background. The opening bell rope was visible at the edge of the frame. People around her were clapping. Preston stared at the picture until his eyes began to ache. That's her, he said, voice low. Cohen nodded. It's her. But Sarah Jenkins isn't. The words slid under Preston's ribs like cold water. Preston turned the page. More photos. A headshot from a corporate site. A candid in a hallway. Badge on a lanyard. Her face didn't change, but her posture did less cautious, more certain. The same eyes. Sharper. Cohen's voice stayed even. Pseudonym. Recent. She's been careful. Preston's fingers tightened on the paper. What's her real name? Cohen didn't answer immediately. He watched Preston for a fraction of a second, measuring how hard the truth would hit. Then he said it. Sarah Sterling. The room didn't get quieter, but Preston's hearing narrowed anyway, as if the name itself dampened sound. The hum of the building, the distant click of keyboards, the faint rush of air through vents, everything receded. Preston's head lifted slowly. Across the office, Brad, who had been pretending to read a report on the couch, froze as if someone had called his personal name in a courtroom. Sterling? Brad muttered. No. Preston didn't look at Brad. His gaze stayed on Cohen. Related to Brad? Cohen shook his head once. No relation. Brad exhaled too fast, a sound caught between relief and insult. Cohen continued, calm, brutal. Related to Arthur Sterling. The air left Preston's lungs in a single, silent drop. Arthur Sterling wasn't just a name. It was a scar on the street. 5 years ago, Sterling Hawk Capital had been untouchable. Then it had vanished in a night of headlines and handcuffs. The fallout had swallowed pensions, retirements, entire lives. Even the people who made money off the collapse spoke the name with a careful edge, as if it might stain their tongues. Preston's eyes returned to the file. His fingers flipped faster now, driven by dread. He found the legal summary. He saw the dates, the investigative agencies, the interview notations, the kind of paperwork that smelled like fluorescent lights and stale coffee, and the slow grind of institutions deciding who to crush. She's his daughter, Preston said, almost whispering, the words tasting wrong. Cohen didn't correct him immediately. He let the sentence hang long enough to hurt. Then he slid the knife in deeper. She was his head of risk management, Cohen said, and she went to the SEC. Preston's eyes snapped up. She what? Cohen leaned slightly forward, forearms resting near the folder as if anchoring it. 4 times. She reported irregularities before the collapse. She tried to stop it. Preston's thumb moved over the edge of a document marked with an agency header. The paper was thick, official. Someone had stamped it once. The ink had bled into the fibers. She's not convicted, Preston said, reading quickly, searching for the final word that would explain why a woman like this was carrying wine to men like him. Cohen's jaw tightened. Insufficient evidence for a conviction. That's what the system wrote down. Preston looked back at the photos, at the bright NYSE image that felt like a different lifetime. But the street convicted her anyway, Cohen added. Preston turned another page and saw it. The consequence that didn't need a judge to exist. Blacklisted, assets frozen, licenses gone. A life turned into a ghost story without the courtesy of an ending. Cohen's voice stayed flat, but something in his eyes sharpened. Her father left debts behind that bankruptcy didn't touch. They followed her. Collection notices, lawsuits, people looking for payment. Preston's throat tightened. He stared at the NYSE photo again. Her smile there looked fearless. The Sarah he'd met at Liarden had looked like someone who expected the world to swing at her at any moment. She saved me, Preston said, the words slipping out before he could polish them. His voice sounded unfamiliar in his own office. She had every reason to let me walk into that deal. Tom, standing near the window with his tablet tucked against his ribs, spoke carefully, as if words might trigger something. Maybe she couldn't watch bad math happen. Preston didn't answer. His gaze stayed on the file, on the chain of paper that had dragged a brilliant woman into hiding. His fingers stopped on one sheet, an address line. A walk-up in Astoria, 4th floor, Unit 4B. Cohen's voice lowered. You can't just go there, Preston. She's terrified of suits. She thinks everyone comes to collect. Preston's eyes lifted. The river outside the glass looked cold and distant. He closed the folder with a slow, final motion. The manila edges met with a dry, papery sound. He stood. The chair rolled back a few inches, wheels whispering over carpet. I'm going, Preston said. Brad's posture snapped upright. Preston didn't look at him. He buttoned his jacket, the fabric pulling tight across his shoulders like he was putting on armor for a different kind of fight. If the press finds out you're meeting with Arthur Sterling's daughter, Brad started, voice rising. Preston paused at the door. He turned his head just enough for them to see his profile. "Then we keep it a secret," he said, quiet and absolute. He opened the door. The glass tower's air was cold against his face as he stepped out, carrying a ghost's address in his pocket like a debt he intended to pay. Queens in the Rain didn't look like New York from the top of a glass tower. It looked older, lower, closer to the ground. The streetlights bled into puddles. Exhaust hung in the air like a wet scarf. Preston stepped out of the black SUV and immediately felt the mistake of his shoes. The sidewalk in front of the peeling brick building was uneven, slick with oil and rain. His Italian loafers darkened at the toes. A delivery bike splashed past, spraying grit onto his cuff. The driver stayed behind the wheel, watching the block the way trained people watched unfamiliar blocks. Preston tilted his head up. 4th floor. One dim light flickered behind a window, not steady, like it couldn't decide whether it wanted to be seen. The entryway smelled of old carpet, boiled cabbage, and something metallic water in pipes, radiator heat. The lobby light buzzed faintly. On the wall, a row of mailboxes with dented doors and faded labels looked like a graveyard of names. He found the intercom. Unit 4B wasn't printed. It was written on masking tape, the edges frayed, the ink slightly smeared as if someone had tried to erase it and failed. Preston pressed the button. A harsh buzz cracked through the speaker. Then a voice, small, distorted, guarded. "Who is it?" Preston swallowed once, the sound loud in the narrow lobby. "It's the man from the restaurant," he said, "the one who asked for advice." Silence stretched, not the polite silence of a boardroom. A heavy silence, the kind that listened back. "Go away," the voice said. It cracked on the last word. "I don't have anything for you." "I'm not here to take," Preston replied, leaning closer to the metal box as if proximity could make him sound less like a threat. "I'm here to pay. You saved me." Another pause. Then the lock clicked. A mechanical buzz. The door released with a reluctant groan. Preston stepped inside. The air changed immediately. Warmer, stale, close. The stairwell light flickered as if it resented being asked to work. Each step was shallow and worn, the edges softened by decades of feet. His hand brushed the rail, and his fingers came away damp. He climbed. 1 flight. 2. The smell of cabbage grew stronger, mixed with old detergent and radiator dust. By the 3rd flight, his breath fogged lightly in the cooler air near the windows. By the 4th, his collar was damp with rain that had followed him in. At the top, the hallway was narrow and dim, paint peeled near the baseboards. Somewhere behind a door, a television murmured. A baby cried once and stopped. Unit 4B was cracked open. Sarah stood in the gap. She wasn't in a uniform now. She wore an oversized gray hoodie and leggings. Her hair was loose, messy, as if she'd run her fingers through it too many times. Without the tight bun and the restaurant mask, she looked younger and somehow more tired. Her eyes flicked past him immediately, scanning the stairwell, the corner, the shadow behind his shoulder, checking for cameras, for police, for suits. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was flat, but there was a tremor underneath it, held down by force. "If anyone sees Preston Calloway knocking on this door, your stock drops by morning." "You know who I am," Preston said. "I know everyone," she replied without a trace of pride. Her gaze cut to his jacket, his watch, the clean edges of him. "What do you want?" Preston reached into his coat and pulled out a folded check. He held it out carefully, like a peace offering that might explode. The number on it was large enough to change a life. The ink was still fresh. Sarah's eyes moved to the zeros and stayed there a fraction too long. Something hungry flashed behind her restraint, then disappeared. She didn't reach for it. "I don't want your charity," she said, voice hardening. "And I don't want your pity. I told you because I hate bad math, not because I wanted a tip." "It's not a tip," Preston said. "It's payment for services rendered." "I'm not a consultant," she snapped, the word bitter. Her fingers tightened on the door edge. "I'm a pariah. Take your money and go." She started to push the door closed. Preston reacted without thinking. He shoved his shoe into the gap. The leather scraped against the threshold. The door stopped. Sarah's eyes flashed up, sharp, furious. "Don't." Preston held his ground, rainwater dripping from his coat hem onto the hallway floor. "Why are you punishing yourself?" he asked. and it came out rougher than he intended. I read the file. I know you tried to stop him. Her face went still, like a switch had flipped. For a second, the exhaustion vanished, and something hotter surfaced. Because the world doesn't care about the truth, she hissed. Her voice dropped, intense, controlled. It cares about the narrative. To them, I'm not the whistleblower. I'm the name on the documents. My father is dead. He took the easy way out. Her throat worked once. I'm the only one left to hate. The hallway felt smaller. The radiator clicked. Somewhere down the hall, a faucet dripped in slow repetition. Sarah exhaled, and the anger didn't leave her face. It just settled into something colder. Now leave, she said. Preston pulled his foot back. The door opened an inch again, but she didn't step away. You're right, he said quietly. Narratives are powerful. Sarah's eyes narrowed, suspicious. Preston reached into his coat again. Not for money this time. He pulled out a folded printout cheap paper, creased, rain-spotted at the corners. A candlestick chart. Timestamps along the bottom. I didn't come here just to pay you, he said. I have a problem. Someone is shorting my fund like they know my moves. Sarah's jaw tightened. Not my problem. He held the paper out anyway, closer. I want the eyes that saw what everyone else missed. She stared at the chart. Her body didn't move, but her gaze did fast, precise. Her fingers twitched once as if reaching for a pen that wasn't there. She shouldn't look. She knew that. The door chain on the inside of the frame glinted in the dim light, a reminder of what she had built her life around. Keep them out. But the numbers pulled at her like gravity. She snatched the paper from his hand. 5 seconds. 10. Her thumb traced along one sequence of spikes, then stopped. Her eyes narrowed. Her breathing changed, subtle, but Preston heard it. The addict part of her had woken up, the part that couldn't unsee a pattern once it showed itself. It's not a leak, she whispered, almost to herself. Preston's chest tightened. Then what is it? Sarah looked up. The tiredness was still there, but something else sat on top of it now, focus, sharp and alive. It's a mirror, she said. Preston blinked. A what? Sarah jabbed her finger at the time, stamps along the bottom edge. Her nail clicked lightly against the paper. Look, she said, rapid now, cutting cleanly through his confusion. Every time you enter a large position, there's a micro-flash crash in the sector ETF, exactly 3 milliseconds before your trade executes. She held the paper closer to his face as if she needed him to see what she saw. That's not an employee texting your plans. That's someone front-running your order flow at the exchange level. Preston's mouth went dry. How? They tagged your broker ID, Sarah said, eyes back on the chart. Who clears your trades, Goldman or Apex? Preston answered without thinking. Apex. Sarah's expression didn't change, but the certainty in her eyes sharpened into something almost cruel. There it is, she said. They routed you through a dark pool in Jersey to save fees. Someone is sitting in that pool waiting for your signature volume. Her thumb traced another line, slow, deliberate. They scalp you for pennies. Death by 1,000 cuts. Preston stared at her, stunned. His analysts had been hunting for a spy for months. She had diagnosed it in a hallway that smelled like cabbage and damp carpet. Sarah lowered the paper slightly. Her gaze flicked to his suit again, then to the empty stairwell behind him, then back to the chart, as if she couldn't help herself. Preston's voice came out quieter than he expected. Come work for me. Sarah's eyes snapped up. The door chain glinted again like a warning. No, she said immediately. Preston held up the check again, but he kept his distance this time. 20,000 a month, he said. Cash, advisory, no one has to know. Sarah's lips pressed together. The offer hovered between them like a heat source. Preston watched her eyes flick, just once, toward the inside of the apartment, toward whatever bills and notices waited in there. And, Preston added, lowering his voice, I'll give you the resources to clear your name. Sarah didn't answer right away. The hallway's light buzzed. The radiator clicked. The drip down the corridor kept time. She looked at the check, then at the chart, then at Preston's face. For the first time, she didn't look at him like he was here to collect. She looked at him like he might be useful. I don't work in your office, she said, voice controlled, setting terms as if it was the only way to breathe. I work from here. I don't wear a suit. And I don't talk to Brad. Preston's mouth twitched into something that wasn't a bark, not quite a laugh, more like relief trying not to show itself. Deal, he said. Sarah's grip tightened on the chart as if it were a lifeline and a weapon at the same time. The door stayed open. By the end of the week, Sarah's apartment stopped looking like a place someone hid in and started looking like a place someone worked from. 3 monitors sat on a folding table that bowed slightly in the middle. A secure terminal hummed with a low, steady vibration that made the cheap blinds tremble when a truck rolled past outside. A Bloomberg access key lay taped to the desk with clear packing tape, the kind of improvised security that told the truth about how fragile her new life still felt. An encrypted line sat beside it, black and plain, with a single indicator light that blinked like a restrained pulse. Sarah didn't decorate. She arranged. The glow from the screens painted her face in shifting blocks of green and gray. She worked in silence, hoodie sleeves pushed up, a pen tucked behind her ear out of habit even when she wasn't writing. The smell of instant noodles and old radiator heat lingered in the room, competing with the sharp, clean scent of new electronics. On the other end of the encrypted line, Preston's world stayed expensive. Hudson Yard's glass reflected the sky as if it owned it. The trading floor below him moved in organized violence, keyboards clacking, phones pressed tight, screens flickering with numbers that decided who ate and who didn't. But something about the rhythm had changed. Decisions that used to be made with swagger now paused for a single text message. Sarah didn't send paragraphs. She sent scalpel lines. Hold. Not yet. 2 days. Exit before the volume turns. Do not short. Trap. Each message hit like a door lock snapping shut. The first time Preston obeyed her against his instincts, it felt like swallowing pride. The second time, it felt like discipline. By the third, it felt like survival. A commodities curve bent the wrong way on a Wednesday. Sarah saw it before the analysts finished arguing about it. Preston shifted, quietly. And by Friday afternoon, the firm booked a profit that made junior traders stare at their screens as if the numbers had glitched. Then came the pharma merger. Sarah didn't explain. She forwarded a single line, private jet flight logs, 2 CEOs landing in the same city within hours of each other. Preston's team laughed until the announcement hit and the laugh died in their throats. His fund climbed. 8% in a month. Green lines that looked like miracles on the screens. Preston started walking differently. Less bark, more focus. He stopped calling it luck. He stopped pretending he was seeing the whole board. But the glass walls of his conference room held tension the way a sealed jar held pressure. Brad Sterling felt it first. He paced the length of the mahogany table like a caged animal, dress shoes striking the floor in hard, impatient taps. His tie loosened by an inch. His smile wore thin at the edges. "It's humiliating," Brad said, slamming his palm down once, making a water glass jump. The ice clinked sharply. "We're about to short Vortex Motors. Everyone knows it's a scam. No revenue, vapor promises, and you're telling me to hold off because your guru says so." Preston sat at the head of the table, phone in hand, eyes on the screen like it was a compass. The message from Sarah was simple. Do not short Vortex. Trap. Preston's thumb hovered over the glass. He didn't look up right away. "The guru has been right 6 times, he said evenly. "You've been right twice." Brad's face reddened. "Who is this person? Why won't you bring him in?" Tom Miller shifted in his chair, careful, as if moving too fast might break something. He kept his voice low, practical. "Preston, we're managing $4 billion. We're relying on an anonymous source. If the SEC finds out we're trading on outside signals without vetting, it's failure to supervise. It's risk," Brad cut in, pointing like the word itself was a weapon. "It's reckless." Preston finally looked up. His gaze was calm, but it pinned the room. "1 more week," he said. "Then I'll explain." Brad stared at him, then at the phone, as if he wanted to rip it from Preston's hand and see the name behind it. On Sarah's end, in the Astoria apartment, the night pressed against the window in wet darkness. Her screens glowed with charts and timestamps. She pulled up the execution logs and watched the entries line up. Not noise. A pattern pretending to be noise. Her thumb traced along the timeline. Each time Preston's fund entered a large position, the sector ETF dipped small, sharp just before the execution. The same gap. Again, again. 3 milliseconds. She didn't have to count it anymore. She could feel it, like a metronome that refused to go away. The same signature told her the earlier diagnosis wasn't a guess, it was a fingerprint. She exported the log file and saved it under a neutral name. The terminal flashed a confirmation across the bottom of the screen. Saved. Time-stamped. Encrypted. She stared at that tiny line until her eyes burned. Evidence had to be built the way walls were built. Brick by brick. Dated. Sealed. The encrypted phone blinked. Preston's line. "Are we still holding Vortex?" he asked. Sarah's gaze stayed on the log. "Yes," she said. One word. Then another, quieter. "And don't talk about me. Not in that room." Preston didn't ask why. He had started to understand that her paranoia wasn't irrational. It was trained. "Understood," he said. Sarah ended the call and listened for a moment to the apartment's silence. The radiator clicked. A neighbor's music thumped faintly through the wall. Outside, a siren doppered past, like a warning that never fully left. Back in Hudson Yards, Brad watched Preston pocket the phone, watched the calm settle over him like armor. Brad's jaw tightened. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "One more week," he repeated, tasting the words like something sour. Preston stood, signaling the meeting was over. Chairs scraped. Screens continued their indifferent flicker. People filed out, pretending not to look at Brad's clenched hands. As the room emptied, Brad lingered by the glass wall, staring out at the city. His reflection stared back, sharp suit, controlled face, anger held down by discipline. In the quiet, his own phone lit up in his palm. He typed fast, thumb moving with the urgency of someone trying to get ahead of a story he could feel slipping away from him. He sent the message without looking at who might be watching. Across the river of glass and rain, Sarah's saved log sat on her screen, time-stamped and sealed. 3 milliseconds. Again. Again. A fingerprint waiting for a hand to match it to. The first sign wasn't panic. It was the color. Outside the glass conference room, the trading floor's giant central screens shifted from calm blues to hard red in a single breath. Lines that had been stable a minute ago began to tilt downward, then drop, then cascade. The room filled with a new kind of light red reflections sliding across faces, turning white shirts into something bruised. A low alarm began to hum, not loud, just persistent, the kind of sound that crawled under the skin and stayed there. Preston rose from his chair so fast it rolled back an inch on its own. The wheels whispered on carpet. "What is that?" he said, already moving toward the glass. Tom was halfway to his laptop, fingers on keys, eyes wide. "Volatility halt warnings," he said. His voice was thin, tight. "Something's crashing." Brad's face brightened for a split second, as if he'd been waiting for the universe to prove him right. "Is it Vortex?" he asked, almost eager. Tom's gaze snapped to a scrolling list of tickers and then went pale. "No." He swallowed hard. "It's us." Preston's head turned. "What do you mean, us?" Tom's hands flew, pulling up portfolio exposure. The screen filled with names TechCom, Biogen, Solaris, each one bleeding red at the same time. It wasn't a market move. It was choreography. "Someone is dumping massive blocks into every name we're heavy in," Tom said. His finger jabbed at the order book. "They're driving price down to trigger margin calls." Outside the glass, traders stood up from their desks like a wave rising. Phone lines lit. Shouted numbers cut through the air. The server hum in the floor beneath the room seemed to thicken, rising in pitch as if the building itself had started to strain. Preston watched the loss counter climb. 10 million, 20, 40. The red didn't just move, it poured. "It's a bear raid," Preston said, voice cold, controlled. He stared at the synchronized drops as if he could intimidate them into stopping. "They know exactly what we own." Brad's mouth opened, anger beating fear for a moment. "Who has that kind of money?" he snapped. "This is a $1 billion attack." Preston's phone buzzed once in his palm, a sharp vibration against skin. "Call me now." "Sarah." Preston didn't hesitate. He hit speaker and set the phone on the mahogany table. The table's polished surface reflected the screen's red like spilled wine. "Sarah," Preston said. You seeing this? I see it. Her voice came through, steady but fast. In the background, there was the faint staccato of typing, keys hitting in quick bursts. Don't talk over me. Give me the tickers you're watching. Tom leaned in, rattling them off. His voice shook as he read, Solaris, Biogen, TechCom. I already have them, Sarah cut in. I'm tracking the order flow. Brad's eyes narrowed at the speakerphone. That's a woman, he muttered, disbelief twisting his expression. Preston ignored him. Where's it coming from? Sarah's typing stopped for half a second, then resumed faster. Shell Company in the Caymans is placing the sales, but routing isn't offshore. Her voice sharpened. The route is coming through a terminal in Midtown. Preston's jaw tightened. Midtown meant proximity. Midtown meant someone had set this up from a place that understood the street's arteries. Who? Preston demanded. Sarah didn't answer immediately. When she did, the words came out slower, as if she hated the shape of them. The signature style is aggressive, she said. High frequency. It's a hunt and destroy algorithm. The red continued to pour outside the room. The alarm hum deepened. A trader slammed a fist on a desk. The sound muffled through glass but still felt in the air. Sarah's voice dropped, and something in it trembled, not fear, but recognition. Preston, she said, this is the exact same code my father used. The conference room went still. Tom's fingers froze above the keys. Brad's face shifted, the earlier anger collapsing into a kind of wary comprehension. Preston felt a cold line run down his spine, as if someone had opened a door behind him in winter. Your father is dead, Preston said, forcing the words out, needing the fact to hold. But his code isn't, Sarah replied. The typing on her end returned, relentless. And neither are the people who learned it. The loss counter ticked higher. 50 million, 60. A number that would have felt abstract a week ago now felt like blood. Preston leaned over the table, eyes locked on the speakerphone as if he could pull her through it. Why us? Because you're winning, Sarah said, voice tight. And in this city, people don't like winners who didn't pay their dues to the right ghosts. Brad stepped closer to the table, his expression twisting like he'd just tasted something familiar and hated it. His eyes narrowed on the phone. Wait, Brad said sharply. That voice. Preston didn't look at him. Can you stop it? He asked Sarah. Can you shut it down? I can't stop the selling, Sarah said. They have more capital than you. If this keeps going for another hour. She inhaled once. Controlled. You'll be insolvent. The word hung like a threat carved into glass. Tom's shoulders sagged as if he'd taken a physical hit. We can hedge, he whispered, more to himself than to anyone. We can. No, Sarah snapped. The background typing stopped. When she spoke again, her voice was steel. We don't try to stop the waterfall. Brad's hands lifted in disbelief. Speak English. Sarah's breath came through the speaker, audible now, like she was running while she talked. They're shorting everything you own, she said quickly. They're betting the price goes down. Preston stared at the red screens beyond the glass, at his fund bleeding in synchronized cuts. The server hum rose another notch, vibrating the table just enough to make the phone buzz faintly against the wood. So what? He asked, jaw tight. What do we do? Sarah paused for the smallest possible moment. When she spoke again, her voice was low and certain, like a knife sliding out of a sheath. We buy, she said. Tom looked up, eyes wild. We can't buy. We're out of cash. Sarah didn't soften. Then you use leverage. Brad's face contorted. That's suicide. Preston stood very still, feeling the weight of the room's fear pressing against his skin. Outside the glass, traders moved like a swarm under red light. Phones screamed, screens flashed. The hum of servers and air systems blended into a single digital heartbeat. On the table, the speakerphone waited. Sarah's voice came through one more time, quieter now, and colder. This algorithm has a flaw, she said. It's greedy. Preston's fingers curled against the edge of the mahogany. His knuckles whitened. What's the flaw? He asked. Sarah exhaled once, and the line went razor sharp. If it senses resistance, she said, it doubles down. The red numbers kept falling. But for the first time in minutes, Preston wasn't just watching the drop. He was listening for the moment to push back. Preston's hand stayed on the edge of the mahogany table as if the wood could keep him upright. Outside the glass, the trading floor looked like a war room lit by emergency signals. Red glowed off foreheads, off knuckles, off the rims of coffee cups abandoned mid-sip. Phones flashed, monitors flickered. The low alarm hum blended with the heavier vibration of servers, a thickening sound that made the air feel pressurized. On the table, the speakerphone breathed with a faint electronic hiss. Sarah's voice came through, measured and urgent. "We don't fight the waterfall by swimming with it," she said. "We swim up it." Tom's mouth opened, then shut. His eyes were glued to the margin display, where a line had turned from warning yellow to a more dangerous shade of orange. Brad shook his head hard, like he could dislodge reality. "This is insanity," he snapped. "If we buy into this, we die faster." Sarah didn't react to his tone. "If we sell, you die anyway," she said. "They're not hunting positions. They're hunting your panic." Preston stared at the loss counter as it climbed, the digits ticking like a countdown he couldn't hear but could feel. His phone vibrated faintly against the table's surface. The server hum rose another notch, as if the building itself had leaned forward to listen. "How much do we need?" Preston asked. A short pause. Then Sarah, quieter. "Everything you have left." The words were simple, but they tied a rope around his throat. Tom's voice cracked. "Preston, the liquidity reserves, those are for disaster." "This is disaster," Sarah said. Brad stepped in, palms up, pleading now. "We can salvage 60%. Hedge, retreat, survive." Preston looked at Brad the way he would have looked at any man offering an easy exit. For the first time, the offer didn't comfort him. It disgusted him. He closed his eyes for one beat. In the darkness behind his lids, he saw a waitress holding a tray like a shield. He saw a footnote. He saw a cliff edge he'd never noticed until the air below it brushed his face. When he opened his eyes, the red on the screen seemed sharper. "Tom," Preston said, voice low and final. "Unlock the reserves." Tom flinched. His fingers hovered above his keyboard, shaking. "The bank will notice." "Get them on the line," Preston said. "Now." Tom's hands moved. He dialed with one hand while the other pulled up the emergency credit menu. The room filled with small, sharp sounds, keyboards clacking, a muted dial tone, a call connecting with a hollow click. The trading floor outside surged. The red deepened. Sarah's voice cut through again. "Wait for Solaris to hit 40. She said. "Not 42, not 41. 40. Preston's eyes locked on the Solaris chart as it fell, the line sliding downward like it had been greased. 42, 41, 40.5. Tom's screen flashed a warning. Credit lines, redlining. The words pulsed, bold and ugly. "Preston," Tom whispered. "Another 50 cents and the bank seizes." "Hold," Sarah said. Her voice was calm enough to be terrifying. "If you flinch, the algorithm smells it. 40.2, 40.1, 40.03. Brad's breathing turned loud. Sweat gleamed at his hairline. "Now," Sarah said. Preston didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He nodded once, like a man accepting impact. "Buy," he said. The word traveled through glass and fear. Traders outside slammed keys. A burst of order notifications chimed in rapid succession, a series of bright dings that sounded like needles dropped on metal. Solaris hit 40. It hovered at 39.98, then bounced to 40.1, then dipped again. The doomsday algorithm answered instantly. Cell walls stacked in the book like concrete blocks. The red line jabbed down again, harder this time. The server hum rose, thick, physical, vibrating the water in the glass on the conference table until tiny ripples formed on the surface. "It's doubling down," Brad blurted, voice high. "It's throwing the kitchen sink. Sell, Preston. For God's sake, sell." "No," Sarah snapped. "Look at the spread." Tom's eyes darted to the bid-ask. His lips parted. He swallowed. "It's not selling new shares," Sarah said, fast, precise. "It's naked shorting. It's selling what it doesn't have, hoping to buy back cheaper in seconds." Preston's fingers curled tighter into the mahogany. The edge bit into his skin. "So what happens?" he asked, voice tight. Sarah's breath came through the speakerphone. Then, softer, almost intimate in its certainty. Now, we squeeze them. Tom's call connected. A banker's voice came through, startled, controlled. Calloway, we're seeing unusual activity. Open the line, Preston said. Now. Tom's hands moved like he was operating on himself. A menu opened. A confirmation prompt appeared. His finger hovered. That's your personal Cayman account? Tom said, eyes wide. That's your retirement. Preston's gaze stayed on the hovering price. $39.99. 40.01. The line trembled like a wire under tension. Do it, Preston said. Tom hit enter. 100 million flooded the buy side. On the screens, the effect wasn't gradual. It was violent. The line snapped upward. 40.5, 41, 42, 43. Green erupted like a flare in a dark room. Traders outside the glass shouted, half in disbelief, half in relief. Someone slapped a desk. A chair skidded back. The alarm hum softened under the sudden roar of renewed volume. It's squeezing, Tom shouted, voice cracking with adrenaline. The algo has to buy back to cover, but the price is running away. The order dings didn't slow. They multiplied. The doomsday algorithm, caught, began to chase its own tail, buying back shares at a premium, feeding the climb it had tried to kill. The red screens turned green in waves. The loss counter stuttered, then reversed. Numbers rolled upward so fast, they looked unreal. 200 million gained in minutes. Preston sagged back into his chair, lungs burning as if he'd been underwater. His suit collar felt suddenly too tight. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at the speakerphone. Sarah, he exhaled, a rough sound that could have been gratitude or shock. You just made us kings. Don't celebrate, Sarah said. Her voice was cold again, cutting through the noise like a blade through cloth. Preston's head lifted. What? The trade logs, she said. Look at the latency on the cancel order. Tom's fingers flew, pulling up the latest entries. The green line still climbed, but the room's air changed. The server hum dropped slightly, as if the building had stopped straining and started listening. Tom's eyes narrowed at the numbers on the screen. His face drained. The doomsday algo stopped trading the millisecond the Cayman money hit, Sarah continued. But the kill command didn't come from outside. Preston's mouth went dry. What are you saying? Sarah didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Even fiber from Midtown takes milliseconds, she said. The cancel order shows essentially zero latency. That means it originated from inside your local network. Silence punched through the room. Preston stood slowly, as if sudden movement might trigger a trap. The green cheers outside the glass blurred into distant sound. He could hear only the small electronic hiss of the speakerphone and the faint tick of the wall clock that no one had noticed until now. Sarah's next words landed with the weight of a locked door. The person running the attack, she said, is in the building. Preston's eyes moved across the room, deliberate. Tom by the screens, the assistants beyond the glass, the traders celebrating. Then, his gaze found Brad. Brad stood near the window, back half turned. He wasn't cheering. His hand was in his pocket. His shoulders were too still. Sarah's voice came through one more time, quiet and certain. They're in the room with you. The cheering outside the glass thinned into a confused murmur. Preston didn't rush. He didn't accuse. He simply turned his head toward Brad and let the silence do the work. Brad stood near the window. The skyline reflected faintly in the glass behind him. One hand was still in his pocket. The other hovered awkwardly at his side. He turned slowly, a smile forming too late. Huge rally, Brad said. His voice tried for lightness and missed. We really dodged that one. Tom's screen still showed the trade logs. The cancel order glowed in a column of data, clean and damning. Sarah's voice came through the speakerphone, steady. Check terminal assignments. The cancel originated from a local station. Tom's fingers moved again, slower now, like each keystroke might confirm something he didn't want confirmed. A list populated on his screen terminal numbers mapped to user credentials. He swallowed. Terminal 4, Tom said quietly. Preston didn't look away from Brad. Who's on Terminal 4? Tom's voice barely carried. Brad. The word hung between them. Brad's smile faltered. He pulled his hand from his pocket too quickly. His phone almost slipped. He caught it and forced a laugh that sounded brittle. That's ridiculous, he said. Everyone uses each other's terminals. Sarah's reply was immediate. Not with that access level. Preston took one step closer to Brad. The carpet absorbed the sound, but the movement was enough. Outside the glass, a few analysts noticed the shift in posture. Heads turned. Conversations quieted. It wasn't a bear raid, Preston said. His tone was calm, almost analytical. It was a coup. Brad's jaw tightened. The mask slipped in increments. You were reckless, Brad shot back, anger replacing performance. You were listening to a waitress, a criminal's daughter. You were going to run this firm into the ground. Preston's eyes didn't blink. You bought her father's code. Brad's silence answered first. Then he exhaled sharply, as if tired of pretending. I bought an asset, he said. The feds seized hard drives. They didn't know what they had. I did. His voice hardened. It was the perfect weapon. Elegant. Efficient. Tom stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. Brad straightened his tie, chin lifting. And you can't prove intent. It's just aggressive trading. Glitches happen. Sarah's voice cut in, almost clinical. Server logs don't glitch. I forwarded the execution trail, the IP trace, and the terminal mapping to the SEC and FBI Cyber Division 10 minutes ago. Brad's head snapped toward the speakerphone. Forwarded? He repeated. Tom's phone buzzed on the table. Then another phone buzzed somewhere outside the room. A ripple of vibration moved through the floor like distant thunder. Down on the street, red and blue lights began to flicker against the glass facade of the tower. The reflections crawled up the walls, up the conference room windows, turning the skyline into a stuttering pulse of color. Brad's composure fractured. You think they'll choose you over me? He said, voice rising. We built this together. Preston didn't move. You bet against the house, Preston said quietly. And you forgot the rule. The conference room door opened with a firm click. Two agents stepped in, not dramatic, not shouting. Efficient, controlled. Badges flashed briefly under fluorescent light. Brad Sterling, one of them said. We need you to come with us. The trading floor fell silent in patches as words spread faster than any ticker. Brad looked at Preston once more, something between betrayal and panic in his eyes. It was just business, Brad muttered as the agents took his arms. Preston's expression didn't change. No, he said. It was theft. Brad was led out through the glass doors, past stunned analysts and blinking screens. The elevator down the hall gave a soft ding when it arrived, a polite sound that felt out of place. The green numbers still glowed on the monitors. The immediate aftermath wasn't applause. It was procedure. For 3 weeks, regulators moved through the office like surgeons. Hard drives were unplugged and sealed in evidence bags with time-stamped stickers. USB ports were photographed. Logs were copied and certified. The server room door stood open, humming louder than usual as technicians cataloged every line of code. Preston attended every meeting without his usual impatience. He signed statements. He answered questions. He watched as the narrative shifted in public headlines, from miracle rally to algorithmic sabotage to internal betrayal. Sarah sat for depositions in rooms that smelled of coffee and paper. She spoke carefully, methodically. Data spoke louder than emotion. The logs she had preserved showed modification dates that proved the malicious code had been altered long after she'd left the industry. The chain of custody was clean, time-stamped, verifiable. Weeks later, on a gray Tuesday morning, the SEC issued a formal statement. The lifetime ban was vacated. The asset freeze lifted. A ghost regained a name. 6 months passed. Liardan no longer felt like a stage set for humiliation. The lighting was warmer. The jazz was softer, less performative. Staff moved without flinching when customers raised their voices. There were no raised voices tonight. Preston stepped inside without a tie. The room smelled of butter and citrus and something else calm. At table 4, he paused. Still drinking Pinot? A voice said behind him. Or have you evolved? He turned. Sarah stood there in a cream suit that fit like it had been measured to the millimeter. Her hair was cut sharp at the jawline. Her posture didn't bend around anyone. She extended her hand. He took it. They sat. Dinner was unremarkable in the best way. No spectacle, no performance, just conversation measured in eye contact instead of volume. When the plates were cleared, Preston placed a bound document on the table. "I dissolve the fund," he said. Sarah didn't flinch. "You closed it." "I'm done with the casino," he replied. "I want to build instead of strip." She studied him for a moment, searching for arrogance. She found none. He turned the document toward her. The letterhead read, "Sterling and Calloway." Her name first. She traced the printed serif letters with her finger. The ink didn't smear. It held. "Alphabetical order?" she asked softly. "Of course," he said, not smiling. She uncapped a cheap plastic pen from her bag, the same kind she once used to sign receipts. "I have conditions," she said. He nodded. "I expected that." She signed. Outside, the city lights blinked on one by one, indifferent and infinite. Inside, a partnership took shape without applause. The apron had never defined her.